Back in August on G2 Day, LG made quite a stink about their latest flagship phone. They use the buzzword innovation a lot. Now, innovation is a word that we see quite a bit in the smartphone industry. Some would say that we see innovation used too much, while others would say that we just use it in the wrong context. So is LG's new phone really innovative, or is it just change for the sake of change? Or perhaps not even change at all? Well, let's find out in our full in-depth review. In this review, we're going to focus on 4 major categories: hardware, software/user interface, camera, and overall user experience. So, let's get started. When it comes to specs, the G2 is pretty much the cream of the crop. It comes with a 5.2-inch 1920 by 1080 resolution screen using IPS LCD technology, one of my personal favorites. Now this translates to a pixel density of 423 ppi. The battery is a 3000 mAh battery. Processor is a Qualcomm Snapdragon 800, which is quad-core clocked at 2.26 GHz, currently the best processor you can get. An Adreno 330 GPU, an improvement upon last year's 320. 2 GB of RAM, the standard anymore. 32 GB of built-in memory, which is the standard memory option, with 24 available to the user. A 13 megapixel rear-facing camera with optical image stabilization, and a 2.1 megapixel full HD front-facing camera. Now I'll give you a quick tour of the device. I'm using the Verizon version if you couldn't tell from that giant logo, so bear with me. It's going to be a little different, but not too much from the others. So on the front you have that beautiful 5.2-inch screen. On the bottom there's a simple LG logo. Top left you have the front-facing camera, followed by some sensors. You have your typical earpiece for phone calls on the top middle, and the Verizon logo on the right, which seems very out of place because it's not even centered, but that's Verizon. On the left, you have your SIM tray, and that's it. On the right, you have absolutely nothing, aside from a nice trim also. On the bottom, you have your typical headphone jack, a microphone, USB 2.0 port, and then you have your speakers. Now this is different from every other variant because there are only 3 holes drilled in here, and on every other variant, there's kind of a grill. On the back, you have the iconic power button and volume rocker, which actually is a lot more natural than you might think. Don't let that make you not get the phone. Then you have obviously the awesome camera, 13 megapixels with OIS, and your LED flash. Verizon 4G LTE logo, in case you didn't know this was a Verizon phone. LG logo down there, and all your different certifications. On the top, you just have 2 little speaker grills, or microphone grills rather. Now comes the most interesting part of the review, and that's software. The reason I say it's the most interesting part is because I'm a self-proclaimed Android junkie and I prefer stock Android over everything. I hate any sort of skin. So GUI is actually kind of different because they have some useful features that I like. Think of it as TouchWiz, but instead of having like a bluish hue to it, it's got more orange and green, and you got the gist of it. There are actually useful features like knock-on that I find myself using on a regular basis. In fact, that's my primary method of turning the phone on. And also you have to take into account that the buttons are on the back. So they needed a way to make it so you could turn your phone on if it's, say, laying on a table. So out of the box, the G2 is going to run Android 4.2. And that's pretty well standard because 4.3 is basically only available on Nexus devices. Now one of the probably most underrated features that every other reviewer seems to be slamming is called slide aside. I actually think it's kind of useful, and I hate Android skins, so I think that says something. Basically, you just use 3 fingers and you slide across your screen, and you can, quote, save an app. I think that GUI overall is a pleasant experience. I've never experienced a lag with it. I know some people did, and I think that was just a pre-production model issue. But honestly, I can say for having this phone for a week, I don't recall ever having a single lag with it, which is good, and to be expected considering it's running top-of-the-line hardware. Overall, I think the consumers are going to generally enjoy the user interface. Some are going to criticize it, just like people criticize TouchWiz with Samsung, but at least this has useful features, unlike Samsung where you have that stupid, in my opinion, waving across your screen to change pictures. I don't think that's useful at all. I think it's just throwing something in there to have a feature. But again, that's my opinion. Now time for the most anticipated topic probably, and that's camera. Like I stated earlier, it's got a 13 megapixel optical image stabilization camera. I was generally very pleased with the camera performance. It has effectively replaced a point and shoot camera. Unless you really want one, you don't need one anymore. It's good enough. It defaults to about 10 megapixels just to keep a certain aspect ratio, but at 13, I still don't have a problem with it at all. One thing that it has that I actually think is great is a manual focus slider. I can't say I've ever seen that on any other smartphone, and it's good because it's like if you're turning the lens to focus on a camera like the one this video is being recorded on. It's just a nice little feature to have. You can't do it while recording, but you can do it while taking pictures. And that leads me to the next part of this. I found during videos that it had trouble focusing sometimes, and it wasn't anything critical, but it just kept trying to autofocus for some reason, and I'm not quite sure why. Videos always looked great, especially at 60 FPS. YouTube limits videos to 30 FPS, so you can't really see the difference. If I can find somewhere to put a video that supports it, I will, and I will annotate right here. One issue I had with the camera was that it seemed to take longer than I needed it to focus in order to snap a picture. I guess I'm spoiled coming from a Galaxy Note 2, which took it split second, like as soon as I clicked the button. But I think that's pretty much standard anymore, especially for a 13 megapixel camera. It needs to be able to take a picture right when I want it to, not when it wants it to. That's not necessarily too bad though. It's not anything to take away from the camera because it's not 3 seconds and then there's a picture. It's like a half a second. But it's just something that could probably be fixed in a software update, and I think will be. Overall, the camera is great. I don't think you can really get a better camera on an Android device right now, aside from maybe the Xperia Z1, which has been getting mixed reviews. Unless I could see it myself and try it, I couldn't really clarify whether that's true or not. But overall, you're not going to be disappointed with the G2's camera. And now on to probably the most important category, and that's user experience. How is it when you use it? It's great. It feels great in the hand thanks to that curved design. It's got a stepped battery, which basically means the battery is contoured to the shape of the phone instead of being a square slab. And that's good because it lets the manufacturer get every bit of battery out of it, which in turn helps the user with usability and longevity. The back buttons are very natural after just 5 minutes. I find myself reaching towards the buttons on any other phone on the back, but they're not there. I helped somebody with a Galaxy S3 problem the other day, and I went to turn it on the back and the buttons weren't there, obviously. The biggest concern, at least for me, was the 5.2-inch screen. Is it still usable with one hand? And the answer is absolutely yes. What I consider this to be is a phablet trapped in a smartphone's body, which is a good thing. The bezels are so small that it actually allows a nice big screen to be very usable with one hand, and that's a trend that I think most manufacturers are going to follow and should follow. It has just enough bezel to where your fingers don't overlap on the sides, and I don't think you can really eliminate much more. You can probably take some off the top and the bottom, which is what people are going to start doing, and by that point we're just going to have a slab of glass and we're not even going to have a phone, which I wouldn't even be too mad about. The back buttons are very natural, like I said. The camera's been great. The user interface, some are going to like, some are going to not like. I personally actually don't mind it, but that's not really something I can say is either good or bad. That's a personal preference thing. So now comes the end of the review, and you want to know, how does this phone do? What's the score of it? And I'm going to give it an 8.75. That actually might seem a little low, and I'll explain why. Yes, it runs the top-of-the-line hardware. Yes, it has a beautiful screen. Yes, it has a nice battery life. Yes, the bezels are tiny. But it does have that plastic design, and it's not to say that nobody's allowed to have that, because hey, if Samsung does it and they sell so much, why can't LG? I would have liked to see perhaps a polycarbonate design like, say, the Lumia series. But again, that's LG's choice and not mine. Maybe you'll listen to me. It's not to say that the plastic design takes away from it, but it certainly doesn't add to it. You cannot add memory to it, which is another takeaway. 32 gigabytes is plenty for me personally, but of course, given the option, I would love to add more to it. I have a 16 gigabyte card sitting around that I can't put in this bad boy. So there's one little takeaway there. The speakers, it's not to say that they weren't good, but they could have been better. And that's going to be said about probably every phone except the HTC One, because that's one of the features that they nailed with that phone. Well, there, my friends, you have a full review of the LG G2. Now, like I said, it's a really good phone, and it's hard almost to find things that it's not good at doing, because they really did nail a lot of this. The user interface, it's actually usable. Obviously, if I could choose between stock or their interface, I would choose stock, but it's still pretty usable, and they actually added features that you can be productive with and that contribute to your experience with the phone. And granted, there are some useless ones in there too, like every phone. I was a little bummed you can't add memory cards to it, but 32 gigs is definitely an acceptable amount of memory to kind of not push aside, but replace that option for adding memory, I suppose. Camera was also very good. All in all, I'm very pleased with it, and I'm very glad to use it as my daily driver. I really have no desire to go back to any other phone. Battery life is very good, almost on par with the Note 2. Plus, it's got a slightly smaller screen, slightly smaller battery, but it's got 1080p, so it's got a lot more pixels to push around. So, like I said, if you have any questions, feel free, put them down below, message me, whatever you want to do. Do me a favor and like the video if you enjoyed it, or even if you don't enjoy it, like it anyway. Just because it helps me out a lot. And if you haven't yet, please go ahead and subscribe. I'll put a button somewhere floating around here by my fingers. Just because that helps me out and helps you out too. Because if my name's bigger, I can get more stuff to review. And that's knowledge for you guys, and in turn, stuff eventually, because I'll give it out. I do have a couple more videos regarding the G2. Here's my mic. I don't have a stand right now. I don't know why. I have a couple more videos regarding it. I'm going to do a subjective video kind of talking about my opinions on different things about it, not necessarily a review. You'll understand when you see it, as well as maybe another camera sample or two, and I'm going to try to find somewhere to put a 60 FPS sample and put it there and link it. So as always, thank you for watching. I've said it 50 times. It's because of you guys that I'm able to do this, and that I even do it in the first place, because if I was talking to a wall, I wouldn't do it at all. So thank you a million times. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next videos. See you later.